with officials in Turkey and Russia. Not to say we did it and celebrate, I'm sure, but probably tried to galvanize some sort of diplomatic support because they knew what was coming. Hamas. Interesting nonetheless, worth checking that out yesterday. Last point to make here. This operation by Hamas, and this has really slipped through the cracks in coverage over the past week. Surprise, surprise, that's why you're here, because the mainstream media, let's just say, they're a little behind the curve and lacking in understanding in many cases when it comes to this issue and what's going on right now. This operation by Hamas is called Al-Aqsa Flood, clearly referring to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which sits atop the Temple Mount. Al-Aqsa was pretty quiet. As Hamas called for this day of rage, a day of global jihad, all eyes were on Al-Aqsa. For me, many times on a Friday prayers will spill out of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We have 50,000 people on the Temple Mount in and around that mosque. Today, reportedly, there were about 5,000. Israel wisely was restricting crowds of people from going to the mosque. They're permitting some, but not all. So, relatively quiet today, it seems, in Jerusalem, and you have a biblical mandate, as do I, to pray for peace in Jerusalem. Whenever we see peace, shalom in Jerusalem, it's a good thing, but Al-Aqsa, relatively quiet today as other countries around the region flared up with these big anti-Israel protests. But keep an eye on Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks, and I close with this, that Hamas would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. They have used time and time again the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Jerusalem basically as a cudgel around the region flared up with these big anti-Israel protests. But around the region flared up with these big anti-Israel protests. But keep an eye on Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks, and I close with this, that Hamas would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. They have used time and time again these big anti-Israel protests, but these big anti-Israel protests, but keep an eye on Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks, and I close with this, that Hamas would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. They have used time and time again the Al-Aqsa protests, but would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. They have used Aqsa Flood. Would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. On Jerusalem. It was no coincidence. On Jerusalem. On Jerusalem. On Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks. On Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks, and I close with this, that Hamas would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. The Aqsa Flood. Aqsa Flood. Aqsa Flood. This, that Hamas would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. This, that Hamas, that Hamas would call this, that Hamas would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. Would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. They have used time and time. They have used time. Aqsa Flood. Aqsa Flood. Aqsa Flood. But keep an eye on Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks, and I close with this, Aqsa Flood. On Jerusalem. On Jerusalem. On Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks, and I close with this, that Hamas would on Jerusalem. On Jerusalem. It was no coincidence, folks, and I close with this, that Hamas would call this operation Al-Aqsa Flood. They have used time and time again the Al-Aqsa coincidence, folks, and I close with this, that they have used time and time again the Al-Aqsa Mosque and They have used time and time again the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Jerusalem, as an excuse to launch attacks against time again the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Jerusalem, basically as a cudgel against Israel, as an excuse to launch attacks against Israel. And they have an obsession with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and taking Jerusalem. But not just them. The prophet Zechariah talks about this. He says that a day is coming when every nation will come against Jerusalem. Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone, like a cup of trembling. And every nation that comes against it will be cut to pieces in the end. Well, everyone covets Jerusalem. In particular, the Temple Mount is the most coveted piece of real estate in the world. Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone, like a cup of trembling. Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone, like a cup of trembling. Every nation that comes against it will be cut to pieces in the end. Well, everyone covets Jerusalem, in particular the temple, to launch attacks against Israel. And they have an obsession with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and they have an obsession with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and taking Jerusalem. But not just them. Taking Jerusalem. But not just them. The prophet Zechariah talks about this. He says that, but not just them. The prophet Zechariah talks about this. He says that a day is coming when the prophet Zechariah talks about this. The prophet Zechariah talks about this. He says that a day is coming when every nation will come against Jerusalem. A day is coming when every nation will come against Jerusalem. Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone, like a cup of trembling. Jerusalem will become like a burdensome. Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone, like a cup of trembling. And every nation that comes against it will be cut. Every nation that comes against it will be cut to pieces. Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone. Jerusalem will